Well, hey, everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to today's On the Beat segment brought to you by Ingles, your neighborhood supermarket. And it was a busy weekend. It's already started out as a busy week. We got Georgia football players in the NFL that are signing their deals. We've got some projected numbers for what Andrew Thomas is going to make. We're going to tell you just how rich Matt Stafford is. You know he's rich, but this will really put some things into perspective for you. But I want to start out with a Pac-12 teleconference yesterday, and I think it's important as we try to put all these pieces together to read and gain as much knowledge as we can as what different athletic directors and coaches, conference leaders are saying around the country. I'm going to do a quick share or two here on the Facebook. We're just getting started. Got to remind myself, I always want to charge right out of the gate, and they always remind me, hey, it takes a little while for the audience to come around and make sure that everybody's there. So I'm going to go ahead and take a minute, try and get the show started, get everybody a chance to catch up. All right, you better be caught up. So what I try to do, it's a reporter type of thing, and I think it's just common sense, is you gain these little nuggets and bits and pieces of information from what different people are saying around the country. We know it all emanates from the same source. We know that SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey talks with the other Autonomy 5 commissioners every week, and sometimes more than once a week. We know that Sankey talks with his ADs every day. I'm sure these other conference commissioners are talking to their respective ADs. We've heard Mark Emmert weigh in recently. But the thing to remember is that the Autonomy 5 or the Power 5 conference leaders, they're really the ones that are in charge. They're really the ones that control college football. Now, the NCAA has oversight committees, advisory committees that are made up of member institutions. But ultimately, it's going to be what those Power 5 guys, it's going to be the direction that they want to move in collectively. Now, could there be some schools that aren't ready to start? Well, of course, because we know that with this coronavirus pandemic, that the governors from each state are the ones that are really opening up and providing the guidelines that the institutions within their state have to follow. It's not a federal deal. It's not like it can come from the White House and someone can say, everybody open at once or everybody close it. That's not how this works. That's not the way our country is built. So the governors have control. And because there's governor control over this, that means that the resocialization period of the teams getting back could be different. So what they're working to do is they're trying to say, hey, let's try and make this as uniform as possible. For example, Georgia's already open. Let's say Georgia's ready to rock and roll the first week of July, but maybe Virginia's not. Well, Georgia plays Virginia. Would that be unfair if Georgia were able to get their kids back on campus the first week of July, but maybe Virginia had some different statutes or provisions in place, and so they don't report until 2 or 3? So they're trying to make it uniform. That's one of the things that people have been talking about. But a couple of other different ideas and thoughts came out of the Pac-12 conference teleconference yesterday. David Shaw, the Stanford coach, participated in this. So did Clay Helton of USC. So one of the things they talked about was a conference-only schedule. And I started to think to myself, how would that impact Georgia? How much would that help or hurt Georgia? Well, Georgia's non-conference games, other than Virginia, not a whole lot of challenges. I think they play, East Tennessee State as well is another one. And then I believe they've got like a directional Louisiana school on there. I don't have that schedule memorized. You'd think I would, but honest to goodness, Louisiana Monroe is the 26th. East Tennessee State is the 12th. And then obviously Georgia Tech rivalry. But what if it was conference only, right? 8-game conference schedule, or the question would be, would the SEC go to a 9-game conference schedule? We know that that's what they do in the Big Ten. So it just kind of made me wonder, would that help or hurt Georgia? I think it would hurt Georgia a little bit. And part of the reason I think it would hurt Georgia is unless you fill those first 2 dates that right now are occupied by Virginia or East Tennessee State, you're opening with Alabama. And Alabama's a crossover game. So that's a tough SEC West crossover. Your annual crossover is Auburn. And now Alabama rotates on there. You had LSU a couple years ago. Last year it was Texas A&M. So shrinking it down, it might hurt Georgia a little bit. Now, if it's a Georgia-Alabama opener, the only thing I would tell you is I think it probably hurts Alabama even more, because I think Alabama is still primarily strong because of its offense. And how many times have you heard that defense is ahead of offense? It takes the offense time to get their timing, to get their choreography, to get everything in place, to figure things out. And especially at Alabama, where they got like a real big quarterback competition going on. Not sure who the quarterback's going to be. Georgia, meanwhile, yeah, they got some issues on offense too, by the way. Some question marks at wide receiver, some question marks on, but the Georgia defense is so darn good. I wonder if any offense is going to be able to have success against them until middle of October, when those offenses can really get cooking. So maybe big picture, when you look at the Georgia schedule strength, the fact that they play such tough crossover games. But on the flip side, I do think that would be to Georgia's advantage in Tuscaloosa. Also, if there's no fans in the stands, there's a lot of talk about this still. And in fact, the California governor, Gavin Newsom, said last week, his quote was, "It's difficult to imagine a stadium that's filled until we have immunity and until we have a vaccine." And I would agree with that. So, if there's, that would take a bit of the home field advantage away from Alabama. I think that would probably bring the line down on the game. Listen, Alabama's loaded. Their offense is absolutely remarkable. I'm not questioning Alabama. I know they're the odds-on favorite right now to win the SEC. It's, overwhelming almost because Nick Saban has done such a great job for so long. But another one of the questions that's come out of this, and North Carolina coach Mack Brown addressed this. North Carolina coach Mack Brown is 68 years old. Well, we've all done our homework. We all know that the COVID-19 virus is more likely to take a toll on older people or people with, health issues or a compromised immune system. Listen, I'm sure Mack Brown is as healthy a 68-year-old as there is out there. And so is Nick Saban, for that matter. But because of his age, that is something that's kind of been flagged. In fact, he was asked about it on a Zoom call on Monday, and Brown said that he tries not to think too much about the age, but he says, until we're out there and it's real, we're not going to know for sure. He said he had a teenager come up to him and want to take a selfie, and he had to tell the kid, I really can't. So, already it's changed. And, that 6 foot social distancing rule, you wonder, how does it affect the older coaches like 68-year-old Mack Brown, like a 68-year-old Nick Saban? Is it a factor? Will they have to social distance where maybe a 44-year-old coach like Kirby Smart isn't as worried about it? It seems like such a fringe detail, and yet when you look at the numbers, I think there are some concerns. One of the things I said at the onset of this was that I expected some of the older coaches to retire. I don't think Mack Brown and Nick Saban are in that group, but I do wonder about some of the other coaches from other sports that have called it quits and wondered if the COVID-19 pandemic had anything to do with that. I don't know. Would that make you evaluate it if you were a 68-year-old with $30 or $40 million or $10 million or $5 million in the bank and a good retirement? Would that make you reconsider your coaching future? So I thought that was interesting that Mack Brown was getting those questions, and woe to the reporter that asked Nick Saban about it, because you just know it's a matter of time before somebody asks Nick Saban if at 68 years old he's concerned about social distancing. I'd want to be a fly on the wall at that press conference, because I have a feeling that would not go over too well with Nick Saban. He would probably get pretty angry pretty quick. So that was something that we kind of kicked around, is the whole social distancing thing. Now you've got the Pac-12, and they're talking about maybe there won't be a full schedule. David Shaw took it to the next extent, and he even said many of us believe it's not going to be 12 games, and it may not even start on time. So where does that lead us? What if there is an 8 or a 9 game schedule? Well, then the next most logical thing, because you've got an abbreviated schedule, you don't have as many transitive properties to work with. Not that I think the College Football Playoff Committee always gets it right. Now, last year I thought they did. The year before I did not. I still thought that there was an issue with Oklahoma's AD being on the College Football Playoff Committee, even though his team was involved. And you could say, well, Mike, when his team was talked about, he had to leave the room. And I could say, yeah, but when Georgia was talked about, he didn't. And so there was a problem for me there. I still have a problem with that whole 13-member committee of active athletic directors. We've had that conversation before. It'll probably come up again, but maybe not this year. See, I think if you went with a 4-team playoff this year and an abbreviated schedule, if there is indeed an abbreviated schedule and the Autonomy 5, Power 5 commissioners decide we're going to go conference only, let's say they do that. Maybe they even scramble it up and move the season back to the start of October to buy another month for training or for safety purposes. But let's just say it's an 8 or a 9 game schedule. Then I think you are talking about expanded playoffs. And that's something that came up on the Pac-12 teleconference. Obviously, that'd be convenient for the Pac-12, people are saying, because they can't get in the 14 playoff, or they haven't in quite a while. What was it? Was it Oregon? Was that the last team? Off the top of my head. So the Pac-12 interested in an expanded playoff. And when we talk about one of the unintended consequences of a shorter season, obviously the loss of revenue, the loss of people in the stands, the loss of television games, that would be another logical argument for an expanded playoff. If you add another round of playoffs and go 8 teams instead of 4, or even get real crazy and go 16, that's going to be a lot of extra revenue that I don't know if it makes up for all the revenue that you lose by knocking out 3 or 4 games off team schedule, but you'd sure make up for a lot of it, if not even more. And it'd be unprecedented. Now, then the question would become, is the toothpaste out of the tube, and could we ever go back to 4 teams? Which I think with a full schedule, if you're playing a full 12-game schedule with a conference championship game, I think four teams is enough. I don't want to see this turn into the NCAA. I know the fringe fan loves, oh my gosh, it's great. I love the NCAA basketball tournament. But the traditionalist in me, I love the value of every Saturday. I love the value of every Saturday counts. Now, yes, there's been an exception to that rule. Alabama lost by double digits to Auburn and still got in the playoffs. That was a backdoor deal. Alabama, and they won the national championship. They got hot at the end. But that's exactly why I don't like that rule, because I don't think it rewards teams for what they do from start to finish so much as who gets hot in the end. And that's kind of what happens with the NCAA basketball tournament. How many times have you seen a team you said was the best team? Tom Crean at Indiana one year had the best team in the nation. I believe Wired won the Big Ten. They get matched up with Syracuse. It's a bad matchup, and they're knocked out. And it's forgotten. And I said, well, they had a tremendous regular, but nobody remembers regular. We're in this society where nobody remembers the regular season. It doesn't seem to matter. What all that matters is the big prize. It's what we want it all. And in college football, I want the regular season to matter. I want the SEC championship game to matter. I want every scoreboard watching day to count where I don't go, well, they lost, but they'll probably still get in the playoffs. To me, that's one of the problems with professional leagues. It's why I don't care to watch the NBA till the playoffs. And even then, I might wait till the finals, because who cares? It doesn't even look like in the NBA these guys play till the fourth quarter. It's almost like you score, I score, no defense. Okay, now the last 5 minutes, and here come the Sports Center highlights or whatever. I don't want that for college football. I want every play, every snap. I want when the team falls behind, 10-0 to that FCS team for everybody in the country to go, upset alert, instead of, doesn't matter, they're going to make the playoff anyway. So an expanded, but this year, you could make the case for an expanded playoff. There's going to be an asterisk next to the season anyway. Nobody wants that. Nobody likes that. But, the heck with your asterisk, provided everyone's in the same situation. Like, for example, I'll say this. Let's just say Clemson wins the national championship, okay? I'm not going to sit here and go, well, Clemson had 5 or 6 spring practices and Georgia didn't have any. Even though it's a huge advantage that Clemson had an opportunity to get in some of their spring drills before the March 12th shutdown. That's a huge advantage. They're much further along in knowing what they've got than the teams that didn't have any practices in pads and didn't have a chance to evaluate. I mean, you've heard Kirby Smart say, we don't know what we've got at quarterback. You've seen Jamie Newman's Instagram. He's buzzed through town. I don't know, was it for a weekend? Was it for a week, a day? But when he was here, I'm sure he worked out with Dwan Mathis. And they can work out off campus. They can't do anything on campus. But it's crazy to think that Georgia hasn't had some guys get together off campus and do some things. Of course they have. And I'm sure other programs have too. If you want to know the secret to LSU's national championship, They didn't come out of the gate looking that good. They worked out last summer together. They did a lot of voluntary time and Joe Burrow was a man of the people. He wasn't out hunting. He wasn't out playing video games. He was working with his receivers during the offseason. You want to know how to win a title? You want to know how to lead? That's what happened for Joe Burrow. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. I want to move on now to contracts. So I've been following the contracts, now that the Georgia players are signing these deals, and so happy for these guys. They've worked their whole life. And, Jake Fromm is a guy that I think I called him an icon. Some people get their neck hair stands up and they get offended. But an icon to me is somebody that represents a program. And for the last 3 years, Jake Fromm and Georgia have been interchangeable. I mean, he was the face of the program. He took the team to the brink of a national championship as a true freshman. And I think he kind of became that guy. I mean, not of Tim Tebow or Peyton Manning ilk, certainly, but he became a guy that when people saw Jake Fromm, they think of Georgia. And I think they're always going to be intertwined. Also, probably because of his QB1 appearance. I don't know how many of you have seen the QB1 show. If you're still looking for things to watch on Netflix, strongly recommend QB1. It was well done, and I thought it provided some insight into the number one high school program in the nation out there in Las Vegas, as well as Jake Fromm down there in Warner Robins, Georgia, as well as the young man in Pennsylvania, name escapes me now. He ended up at Wake Forest. But the series is really good the way it profiled. I didn't think it was something that I would like, but I really enjoyed it. I would say it was on par with Ozark in terms of how quickly I got through it, right? And I sped through Ozark. What other series that I've gone through, Ballers. Like, I like The Rock. Yes, he's corny, but I love the guy. I think he's fun. I love it. Big football guy with a big personality. So I got through the Ballers series. And I would put QB1 right there with series that I really enjoyed. I've been doing the Netflix top 10 movies lately. Some have been better than others. Some have been worse. But Jake Fromm recently agreed to his deal, and Jake Fromm is going to get $3.597 million over 4 years. That's what his deal is for, provided he plays all 4 years with the Bills or lasts that long or stays on the roster, which I think he will. He has a $685,000 signing bonus per Spot Track, and Spot Track is kind of the unofficial official source of the contracts. Thought that was pretty interesting. Houston Chronicle reported Jake got they reported they only had a $302,000 signing bonus. Spot Track said 685. I'm inclined to believe Spot Track. I talked to a couple of agents since I got this information, a couple of guys representing Georgia people. They told me the Spot Track information is probably a little bit more accurate there. So making $3.597 million over the next 4 years, I don't know about you, but that's pretty good money. A $685,000 signing bonus, that's pretty good money. Yeah, it's going to get taxed pretty heavily, but still, it's enough for Jake to buy a new truck and some new duck calls. 5th round pick, 167 overall. Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas hasn't signed yet to my knowledge. I'm not watching the ticker right now. But Spot Track, they look at the projected numbers, and all these salaries, these rookie salaries, they're pretty much slotted. This goes back to 2011 when they started to kind of slot these salaries, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Andrew Thomas projected to get a deal worth $32 million with a $21 million signing bonus. Think about that. $21 million in your pocket now. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, that's a lot of dough. Isaiah Wilson, who went 29, $11 million deal, $5.9 million signing bonus, but still a first round pick. But look at the difference in the signing bonus: $21 million, $5.9 million. Go down to DeAndre Swift, number 35, third pick of the second round, $3.7 million. So when we've heard Kirby Smart or we've heard Nick Saban tell these guys, hey, if you're not going in the first round, you really need to come back, or you really need to consider coming back. Everybody's different. I get that. And, a lot of people go, oh, these are just kids. They got to have the money, burden the hand to in the book. Look at the difference, though. Now, I'm not saying that if DeAndre Swift would have came back, he would have been the number 4 overall pick. But let's say DeAndre Swift come back and he goes in the top 10. If he goes number 10 next year, you're looking at a $19 million deal instead of an $8 million. It could be worth $10 million to come back for another year. Now, there's a risk reward to that. What if he gets hurt, right? We've heard, well, you buy the insurance policies and things like that. But I thought that was pretty interesting. 3.7. That's a pretty nice signing bonus for DeAndre there. But coming back for another year to go from second round to first round, making $10 million more, that's considerable. Solomon Kinley. You heard Mel Kiper Jr. and some others say, well, maybe Solomon should have came back for senior year. Solomon was a fourth-round pick of the Miami Dolphins. He gets a deal for $4.1 million. Let's go back there to Isaiah Wilson. $11.568 million. So you're talking about the potential for a $7 million difference. If you come back, is it worth it for 1 year? So that's kind of what's stuck in the – and for the guys that don't get drafted, I thought this was interesting. Straight out of the Houston Chronicle on Tyler Simmons, Georgia receiver Tyler Simmons. So he gets an undrafted free agent deal, and these are are negotiated depending on the need or the want of the team, and they're really looking at Tyler to make the team as a receiver and a punt returner. And yeah, he had a very rough senior year at Georgia, but remember, he was playing with that doggone brace on, and I've had people say, oh, you're never critical of Kirby Smart. Listen, I was plenty critical of Kirby Smart and his staff for playing a guy that had a shoulder brace on, that fumbled a punt against Notre Dame, that had a ball go off his hands against South Carolina that was picked off, could have got him beat against Notre Dame. I think did get him beat against South Carolina. And I put that on the coaches. I don't put that on the player for putting a guy out there in a shoulder brace. And Tyler Simmons is a tough guy, and he's the one that's catching all the wrath from the fans, but not from me, because I think the coaches should have had somebody else ready. So I blame the coaches for not having a healthy player out there. So for the people that say I never get critical of the Georgia coaches, I do. I just don't drone on about it. It's not an issue anymore. I'm bringing it up now because it shows you just how good Tyler Simmons could be when he's healthy, that the Houston Texans made him their highest paid undrafted free agent. But even then, his deal is only $75,000. Now, $25,000 of that is a signing bonus, but right now it's $75,000. If he makes the squad but doesn't dress, right? There's always an inactive list of guys that don't dress. His salary will go to $400,000 annually. It'll be prorated though. If he makes the dress squad, it's a prorated salary at the league minimum of $610,000. So what happens if he just makes the practice squad and he doesn't make the roster? Well, then he makes $10,500 per week. And you go, well, that doesn't sound like very much. Well, maybe not relative to Andrew Thomas or Solomon Kinley, but $10,500 a week, that's not bad if you prorate it out, right? You work half a year, you make over $250,000 if my math's right. But it is interesting, and I don't have the contract numbers of the other Georgia players that signed free agent deals. Eli Wolf, I think, has a good deal with Baltimore. Part of the reason I like Eli's deal with the Baltimore Ravens, not just because they got rid of a tight end, but also because like the last 16 years, Baltimore has had a guy rostered that was an undrafted free agent. So I think Eli Wolf will be competing there. J.R. Reed with Jacksonville, you may or may not have heard that his dad said the reason that J.R. didn't get drafted was because of a knee injury that didn't bother him in college, but he was flagged for this. I don't know if that's all together. I'm sure that's part of it. I think that may go into some of the thinking of J.R. not being athletic enough, even though I think he had a very explosive broad jump. I didn't know that he made a lot of dynamic plays for Georgia in terms of interceptions and things like that his senior year. I know he had a nice pick against Notre Dame, but that was one that surprised me. Cager with the New York Jets. I'll be interested to see what happens there. Brian Herring with the Cleveland Browns, another interesting one. Rodrigo Blankenship in Indianapolis. He could be the guy. I think there's a lot of people that believe that Rodrigo will be the guy in Indianapolis, even though he wasn't drafted. Doesn't matter. Tyreek McGee is with the Rams and Tyler Clark is with the Bengals. So we'll keep an eye on these guys, whether or not they make the roster. And now you know some of the numbers that's behind it. Now, remember I was talking earlier about Matthew Stafford, and I kind of wrote the story on the Georgia players' salaries, and then just for fun, I decided to look up, well, what was Matt Stafford's rookie deal like? That was way back in 2009. Maybe it was less. Well, no. Actually, it was much, much more. Because before this collective bargaining agreement that the NFL went with in 2011, I think it was, these guys were able to sign deals that weren't restricted. Rookie deals didn't have a cap on them. Matt Stafford's first deal which worth $72 million. Twice as much of what Joe Burrow, this year's number one pick, is going to get. Now think about that. When does that ever happen that a guy made more money 11 years ago than he makes now? Well, in the NFL, it does. So Joe Burrow is projected to sign a deal worth $36.5 million. Matt Stafford signed the second richest ever rookie deal for $72 million. I mean, unbelievable. And if you're wondering what Matt Stafford makes now, good grief. Try a $135 million 5-year deal. Just signed it in December. This guy's going to make over $292 million of that is guaranteed. Matt Stafford is going to make over $200 million in the NFL. That's unbelievable. Congratulations to Matthew Stafford. So, and I also think they're going to win a playoff game this year now that they've added DeAndre Swift and Isaac Nada. So those were some pretty fascinating numbers to me. Want to take a minute to talk about different stadiums across the country that I've been to. I did a show Friday night, and I did the rating, and not all of you may not have joined me for it, but when I did my top 10, it got pretty tough, especially because, like, for example, like I like Sun Devil Stadium in Arizona State. Like that personally, just the ambiance of it, you know, the mountain, the setting, probably the weather, if we're going to be honest about it. But it didn't make my top 10. I like Kyle Field at Texas A&M. It looks brand new. It holds a lot of people, but they didn't make my top 10. I want to give you my top 10, but first, let me take a minute right now. I want to recognize my sponsor, Ingles. Ingles sponsors me every week. I appreciate the support. I know you appreciate their support in the community. Sometimes we take these things for granted. Let me tell you, I'm not taking anything for granted right now. You go to Ingles now and you see the people wearing the mask, and you realize these people are on the front lines performing a job that supports us in the most difficult times. And Ingles has a tremendous video that they put together to honor these workers. And I want to take a moment. I want to share that video with you right now.
It's in our hearts to feel for real. There's been ups and downs, turnarounds, good days and some bad. But we stand together for worse and for better. We'll always have your back with open arms, heart to heart, hand in hand. Community strong.
Welcome back. Mike Griffith here, and we're going to get into that top 10 stadium list that I promised you. It was tough. It was really tough. My number 10, and you're going to notice there's going to be some stadiums missing here. You're going to go, wait a minute. How are these guys in there? Number 10 for me was Michigan Stadium in Ann Arbor. You know, the big house, it is huge. It's in a great setting. I like the town of Ann Arbor. A lot of really cool places to go there. Somewhat like kind of like Athens. I don't think their downtown is quite as nice as Athens in terms of the number of restaurants and taverns and shops, but it's pretty good. It's pretty strong as far as Big Ten towns go. So I got Michigan number 10. Number 9 is not a college stadium, but it's a college setting. And that's kind of what this was more about, college settings. Mercedes-Benz Stadium. If you haven't been, and I'm sure that 90% of the Georgia fans have been there and the people watching it, but if you have not been to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, it is the best facility out there. It is better than AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. It's better than Jerry World. I haven't been to the Las Vegas Stadium yet. I don't think it's opened up yet, the new Raiders. I'll be interested to see it. But right now, Atlanta, you're at top shelf, man. So much so that I've got them number 9, even though they don't have a college team there. It's that great of a college setting for college football. Number 8, Tiger Stadium, LSU. I'm all about Mike the Tiger across the street. The stadium's awful cool, too. It's big. It's gigantic. You know, the purple, the yellow, loud. Enjoy that. Maybe it would have been higher if Georgia LSU had been a night game. But back in the day, even when I covered some night games there, when I covered Alabama, when I covered Auburn, and I saw them play at LSU, I didn't think that the night atmosphere lived up to the pub. The pregame partying did. You know, you saw a lot of people enjoying themselves. We'll just say that. Number 7 is Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, Florida. I love the Swamp. Love the Swamp. It's boxy. It's tight. It's high. You know, you just get a feeling it's almost claustrophobic. It's just such a tight, hot, loud, vertical stadium. And always enjoyed covering games at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. Gainesville, some like it, some don't. I think it's a beautiful campus. I think Florida has one of the best campuses in the SEC. I think it's a great road trip. I'm all about Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. That's my number 7. Number 6, the Rose Bowl. And Georgia fans go, oh, my gosh, all the way down. Well, yeah, I mean, I've been there a few times. I've seen some national – I saw the Texas-USC game and obviously Michigan State and Stanford. Listen, I like the Rose Bowl, but to me it's just where it loses the college environment is like there's really nothing around there. I mean, it's not like you can like walk and that's difficult. Now, just pure aesthetics, it's beautiful, but setting has to have more for me. And I know some people like the 50-50 split in crowds. For a bowl game, that's great. But to me, what's great is when you're in a hostile environment and you're watching one team try to overcome that crowd in the other team. Those are some of the best games I've seen. When I think about the best wins for programs, it's road wins against rivals. It's Tennessee beating Florida at the Swamp in 2001. It's Georgia beating Tennessee in the Hobnail Boot game. The road victories are just more illustrious to me than the home wins. And I like the home wins. I've seen the goalposts go down in Kentucky in 1997. I was there when they beat Alabama for the first time since 1922. I was at Mississippi State a couple years before when they beat Alabama for the first time in forever, and the goalposts went down there. I believe, did the goalposts come down at Georgia when they snapped that 9-game losing streak with Mark Richt? And I can't recall. Was that 2002? Anyway, most of the time it's the road wins. And so that's why the bowl games to me, that's why the Jacksonville, it's not the same as going into their house. Number 5, Autzen Stadium in Oregon. You know that Phil Knight, the Nike CEO, is a huge donor. Their facilities are incredible. And even though Autzen Stadium isn't as big as some of the other SEC stadium, it doesn't hold 80 or 90,000. It's incredibly loud. And the way that stadium is put together, there's like an overhang, almost like at a fairground. Remember the old fairground, the stands, and there was like an overhang? There's an overhang, and the sound from the crowd at Autzen hits that overhang and reverberates back onto the field. That's how they explain the dynamics of the loudness. I was also told that they had an artificial noisemaker. One of the Pac-12 schools tipped Michigan State off to that. Michigan State searched the stadium during their walkthrough, couldn't find it. But I heard it, and they would actually play it when Oregon and Mariota were on offense, because remember, the Ducks would do all the shifts and motions, and the defenses couldn't react because they couldn't communicate with one another. So usually it's the offense that struggles with the sound, but not when Oregon was playing at home. It was the defenses because of all the movement that Oregon used and all the different formations. And that was kind of a built-in advantage. And you might say that's not fair, but to me, that just added to the allure of what made Autzen Stadium so tough and such an awesome destination. I would say it's a bucket list. It's not a place I'd want to go to every year, Eugene, Oregon, but maybe once every 10 or 12 years would be nice. Number 4 is a Big Ten stadium, what I think is the finest Big Ten stadium and the friendliest college football atmosphere, bar none, and that's Nebraska. Do you know that Nebraska has a sellout streak of 372 games that goes back to 1962? You may have heard that. And the other thing that I can vouch for, having been there a couple times, nicest fans. They don't boo. They don't boo. They cheer the opponent. I talk to players about it. They say, man, this kind of freaks you out a little bit. You're used to all these people yelling at you, screaming at you. These people are cheering. Nice play, number 87. That really happens at Nebraska. Number 3 for me was Neyland Stadium. Now, Georgia fans go, oh, my gosh, I hate Neyland Stadium. The setting of it on the Tennessee River, the verticalness, the orange and white doesn't bother me. I'm kind of colorblind to the SEC. I've covered 4 different SEC schools over the course of my 28 years as a college football writer. So whether it was Auburn's blue and orange or Alabama's crimson or Tennessee's orange and white or Georgia now with the red, I'm colorblind to it. The pageantry of the games to me is like looking at flowers. They're all beautiful when they're full, right? And they're blossoming. And I don't know if we're going to blossom this fall. We will get back to blossoming in these stadiums. We may not blossom this fall, but hopefully we're still playing football. Number 2 to me is Notre Dame. And I never liked Notre Dame growing up. Grew up in Michigan, about 2 hours away from Notre Dame's campus. And I grew up a SEC fan, right? I was watching the SEC, and Notre Dame and the SEC didn't mix, man. And I couldn't. And then I went to Michigan State, and I saw Notre Dame like break their backs with some ridiculous. I love Lou Holtz, but Notre Dame. But now again, you grow up out of the fandom. You become a journalist, a sports writer. You get colorblind, and you start looking for good storylines, and you start appreciating the different pageantry. You don't have the built-in bias anymore. That's eliminated. And you go, you know what? This touchdown Jesus, this is pretty magical. This campus is pretty great. Number one, go ahead, call me a homer. I like Sanford Stadium. I love Sanford Stadium because I think it's got everything. It's got the technology, and yet it's still open-ended. You got over 90,000 people, and it's still an open-ended stadium where I can look out on Sanford and see people walking down the street. And to this day, and they can look in, and you can go for a walk on the Georgia campus and walk right in under the scoreboard. And it's just like, that's really cool that in 2020, there's still a place that welcomes their students and their community to do that. And then there's the town of Athens, which I think is the best college town in the country, bar none. And I don't say that because I'm here now. I say that because, have you ever been there? Have you ever gone to the Last Resort? Have you ever gone to World Famous? Have you ever been to Cali and Tito's? Heck, Zaxby's was founded right around the block. You got to like that. So is Barbaritos. I mean, this place is just flooded with great places to eat. And the downtown has all these shops. There's something for everybody. There's cool men's stores down there. There's a place you can get all these designer sunglasses. The women love it. They got all these shops and trinkets. I mean, there is something for everybody in Athens, and that's why they got to bring that Florida game here every other year so that they can have that in their town, and their merchants can make the money off of that game to support these businesses. I'm worried that when COVID-19 is over, that some of these shops and stores don't open back up, and that you lose them for good, and that you get chains in here, and it starts looking like any other town. That's not what makes Athens and Georgia special. And so those are some of my thoughts. I want to take a look at some of the comments. I've done my share of talking. I want to hear what you all think now as I click on the site and see if you have any comments for me. Take a look here. Oh, I can mute myself there. Appreciate y'all joining me on the Eagles on the Beach show today. It's been fun. No jabs at Jake, just making a point on Joe Burrow earlier in the show and the offseason leadership. I don't think a lot of quarterbacks and a lot of young players get that. I think Joe Burrow's the exception to the rule, but I do believe that was what made Joe Burrow a great leader, and I do believe that was integral to LSU season. And I said this yesterday. I do a show on the Athens on the Ref. It's called The Ref, and they do a Monday morning show, and I come on every Monday at 8. And we talk about, ultimately, the conversation always turns to, Georgia winning a national championship, because that's where Georgia's at right now, right? The number one, the number two signing classes, that's great. That's old news. Sugar Bowl, okay, that's good. You won a Rose Bowl. Winning the SEC, been there, done that. 3 straight SEC championships, good with that. You beat Tennessee, Auburn, Florida, and Georgia Tech the last three times you played all 3 of them. Okay, that's super. But until you get the big one, there's a segment of the crowd that are going to – and I say to you, look, you got to go all out. When Alabama goes all out, I'm reading that book, 4th and Goal, every day. I want to recommend that book. Phil Savage is a friend of mine. He used to be the executive director of the Senior Bowl. Now it's Jim Nagy. You've seen Jim on our show. But Phil Savage is a guy that I've known going back to the 1990s. He used to be a scout with the Baltimore Ravens, so I would see him at the practices back when they had open practices. I'd see him at Alabama, or I'd see him at Tennessee. Now we still communicate a little bit. He was with the XFL recently. But he wrote this book called 4th and Goal Every Day. And it might be a hard read for Georgia fans because they're like, everything's about how great Nick Saban is. But you need to read it because I see a lot of similarities in what Kirby does. And that doesn't mean that everything Nick does, Kirby does. But Kirby was a part of that system with Nick Saban for 11 years. He was there for 4 national titles. He'd be crazy not to implement things that work at Georgia. And it might give you a better understanding. But the big takeaway for me, and I'm only halfway through the book, the big takeaway is that Alabama does everything. Every minute, every movement, every directive is about winning a national championship. There's no yeah, but. There's no qualifiers. Georgia, still yeah, buts. They still have the qualifier. Kirby says, we really need that recruiting weekend for the – yeah, but I like going to Jackson. You're not doing everything you can do to win. You're giving up a recruiting weekend. I just made the case for the town. Now I'm making a case for another recruiting weekend. I'm making a case for one less airplane trip every other year. How good would it be for Georgia this year to have Florida at home? This would be their year to have them at home, but instead they're going to get on a plane amid this COVID-19. Who knows what hoops they're going to have to jump through? Could this cost them? I don't think so, but what if it does? Has it cost them in the past? I talked to Pat Dye about it. I thought to myself, you know what? Pat Dye is a guy that played at Georgia but coached at Auburn. And then he was also at Auburn when Alabama and Auburn moved the Iron Bowl from Birmingham to home and home. Remember that tradition? The Iron Bowl in Birmingham? And Coach Dye said it is dumb that Georgia plays in Jacksonville. He's a member of the Hall of Fame down there. And he's saying, it's crazy. I agree. It's a yeah, but. It's a yeah, but. It's not doing everything you possibly can to win a championship. That's how I see it. Everything else Georgia does, everything else Kirby does. The next thing that's going to come up is going to be this name, image, likeness thing. And when this thing comes up, let me tell you, this is going to be a can of worms. If you want a preview of what it's going to look like when name, image, likeness comes, read Pat Forty's column today on Zion Williamson and the request for comment from Williamson on the supposed payments that his parents were getting from Nike, from Duke. These are alleged. All right, these are alleged payments. It's called a request for admission. This is going to be the same thing that's hitting these recruits. They're going to have agents trying to get to them. They're going to have shoe companies going to try and get to them. In some way, shape, or form, the schools are going to have to work with these people. And Georgia had better be at the forefront of this. They better be progressive, and they better listen to Kirby Smart. That's all I'm going to tell you. If you listen to Kirby Smart, he's on top of this. They didn't listen to him on the Florida-Georgia game. They extended the contract to 2023. Listen to him on this one, okay? They listened to him on the football building. They're in the midst of building an $81 million football building. Why? Because their facilities ranked 8th in the SEC according to the 24/7 poll done last year. 8th. Georgia, number 8 in the SEC in football. Anything shouldn't happen, but it did. Georgia is catching up in the facilities. Once you're caught up in the facilities, the next game is going to be the name, image, likeness. You better be at the front of the train. We're already seeing West Virginia do some things. That's going to be the next big talking point. You're already starting to see some conversations emerge. It's going to be a little bit of a Wild West on the front end of that. So interesting. People that love Jacksonville, they don't care. Doesn't matter if Kirby prefers Athens or has made the case. They're still fans. And I say, okay, if that's your preference, but don't complain when your team is one game short of a national title because you're not doing everything you possibly can to win a national title. That's my opinion, right? That's my 2 cents. I think, and the other reason is because Sanford Stadium is, to me, the best stadium in the country. And even if you don't agree, I think you would agree it's one of the top 5. And why you would ever take a game from that stadium in that setting is beyond me. And that thought came to me during the Notre Dame game last year. And everybody said, this is the most incredible weekend ever. When is it ever going to be like this again? I said, I don't know. Probably when you start playing Florida here every other year. That's when it's going to be like this again. That's when it's going to be this intense. That's when you're going to see all the private planes come in. You're going to have the ESPN game day set here. They'll come for that for sure. As it was, you hadn't had game day here since 2014 for LSU. But if you're good with giving Jacksonville game day and you're good with giving Jacksonville $35 million, you can't help people who don't want to help themselves. I believe there's a legion of Georgia fans that want that game back here. And I believe that this COVID-19 deal and what it's done to the local economy and what it's done to the school, yeah, I think I think 2023 is going to be it. So that's kind of my thought on that whole deal and reading that 4th and Goal Everyday book, reading about Alabama, they moved it to a home and home, all the things that Nick Saban does to win national titles, every movement. They're not playing LSU in New Orleans every year, I promise you that. So there's some thoughts there. You got a lot of people that are going to agree with that. A lot of people are going to disagree with that. And that's fine because that's part of the beauty of college football. The fact that we're having this conversation today is awesome. It's awesome that the Dog Nation people come out in force. They have passion. They love the Georgia Bulldogs. They have opinions. They want to stay informed. I'm going to try and bring you those opinions and information every day. The story's gone up. on what the Georgia rookies are making, what they've signed for. You can take a look at it. It's on the Dog Nation page right now. The projections are there for the Georgia top 3 picks. You can see what Andrew Thomas is going to make, what Isaiah Wilson's going to make, what DeAndre Swift's going to make. You can look at those unbelievable Matt Stafford numbers. I mean, this guy, Matt Stafford, good guy, over $200 million. This guy's made over $200 million playing football, folks. Football pays, right? And now it's just a matter of us getting on track this season. Just to recap the start of the show. Is there going to be a shortened season? Is there going to be an expanded playoff? Are you pro for that? Are you con? Would you be good with conference-only games? Would you be good with an 8 or a 16-game playoff? Hit me up. Leave your comments. You guys know I come back in these comments. I'll read over them. All y'all that hated on me for my Jacksonville comments, I'll see those. And you know what? That's fine. I respect other people's opinions. Everybody's got them. You got your reasons. I got mine. We talk about it. We discuss. We inform. I learn. Maybe somebody will convince me otherwise. Oh, you know what? Maybe that is pretty cool to play cornhole in an RV parking lot. Maybe. So, hey, listen, I got to put a wrap on it, up against it. I want to thank my producer, Michael Carvel, for doing this production. Thursday show, special presentation Thursday. Former Georgia coach Mark Richt is going to join me. Coach Richt had some dealings going on today, but on Thursday, 12 o'clock right here, we're going to have Coach Richt on, and we're going to talk to him about some of these players that Georgia's getting. He's seen Jamie Newman up close. He's seen Trey McKitty and his work as an ACC commentator. Going to go over some of those memories from the great games that Coach led here at Georgia. In my mind, Coach Richt, college football Hall of Fame coach, and one of the greatest gentlemen in the college football business. A big reason why Georgia has such a tremendous national image. First-class coaches all the way, whether it's Vince Dooley. You got to give these guys credit because of the way they represented, and certainly Mark Richt put a smile on everyone's face and how he dealt with them, his personal touch. Quite a man. Look forward to having him on Thursday. Everybody, have a great week. Thanks for joining me on the Eagles on the Beat segment today.